Beastars, despite being held hostage by Netflix, has garnered, in my opinion, well-deserved praise, with its stellar characters, detailed world building, and the overall sense of atmosphere that the anime has managed to replicate with this adaptation. And I believe the choice to depict this story in 3D CG has only helped cement it as the phenomenal story it is, to the point where I'm ready to argue that Beastars would have almost certainly been a worse show had it received a typical 2D adaptation like we see with most series. Of course, it does help that Beastars is being handled by one of the best possible studios for CG in Studio Orange, the same studio that brought to life an incredibly polished adaptation of Land of the Lustrous back in 2017. Though it's worth noting that both series do have a different director. Land of the Lustrous was helmed by Takahiko Kyokoku, whereas with Beastars you have Shinichi Matsumi. So it's not as if it's the exact same creative team. Likewise, the advantages of CG are not as exact or obvious. With Land of the Lustrous, the inherently inorganic structure of each gem meant they were all able to be given their own unique flair through their hair in a way that really couldn't have been done consistently with traditional 2D animation. I've already talked about this at length in a past video, so I won't go into any more detail. And while the shift to Beastars finds us watching a similarly inhuman cast of characters, the advantages in the model department don't feel as readily apparent. The somewhat stiffer CG animation doesn't feel as complementary with the amount of different species depicted and their simply biological existence. But once you get accustomed to that, which by all accounts should be pretty quick, I think you can begin to see the benefits. Mangaka Paru Itagaki has painted an incredibly tense landscape between the herbivores and carnivores in Beastars, so something as simple as the difference in size between characters is more important than in most shows. And CG is great for emphasizing this importance. It can't be used for everyone though. A lot of characters that aren't that significant to the overall plot end up being done in 2D because it doesn't make sense to commit an entire model to them for just one or two scenes. But for those that are CG most of the time, one shot is all you need to be reminded of how different some of this cast really is from one another. Take for example any shot where Legoshi is next to Haru. The CG models lend an extra sense of weight and consistency to the contrast so that it never fully leaves your mind while you're watching. To add to this, Beastars is primarily a character-driven show, with most of the major plot revolving around evolving interactions between said characters. So how the series ends up portraying them is a significant decision, and I believe CG has similar advantages in this area as well. Because another big part of Beastars thus far has been our characters' minds not always matching their physicality. Legoshi is a wolf who, by all accounts, doesn't carry himself like a wolf, let alone most of the other carnivores we see. He hunches his shoulders to make himself appear shorter and less imposing, and doesn't make a ton of eye contact. Likewise, Louis is a deer that always wants to display the strength his body will realistically never allow him to have, and he always maintains great posture. And while you can absolutely portray both of these extremes with 2D animation, heck, we even see the series occasionally utilize it to highlight expressions and interactions, I keep thinking back to that word consistency. With the character models for Louis and Legoshi, there is always going to be that baseline quality for their existence and movement in this 3D space. Everything from their overall poses to small hand gestures can be accounted for, which allows for more body language and character animation than you typically see because it isn't nearly as resource heavy. The trade-off is that the animation won't be as detailed, but for it to be so ubiquitous breathes so much life into these characters. It's as I said earlier, this too pokes and prods at your subconscious constantly. Seeing Legoshi's adorably awkward mannerisms and demeanor is an effective way of putting us in his headspace and getting us to sympathize with him. A great example of this in action is the long uninterrupted shot of him in episode 2 contemplating how he should ask Haru to spend more time together talking, going through several equally awkward poses. I especially love the little finger taps. And at the end, the animators went through the effort of slightly stretching his character model for added effect. You all were looking at the left half of the screen, right? Anywho, I could show more examples, but we'd be here all day, which is kind of the point. But as a counterweight to Legoshi, I think it's only fair to look at an example of this from Louis. There are just as many to point to, but I think one of the earliest and best examples also comes from episode 2 when we learn the extent of his leg injury. Knowing how crucial it is that he be the one to play the lead, Louis staggers to his feet and begins to limp towards the stage, but right before he goes out to continue rehearsal, his posture shifts to his usual upright stature, ignoring the pain as he knows his undaunted image is more important than his physical health. It's a short scene that I think perfectly captured his character up to that point. And so with these two characters, the moments of Louis and Legoshi on screen together serve especially to highlight the pose and nature of the other, driving home each other's characterization even more. All of this is wrapped up in an incredibly ambitious directorial package, to say the least. One thing I've noticed is there are a lot of silhouette shots, both abstract and realistic. The former serving as an effective way to get us into the headspace of a certain character, more often than not, Legoshi. The latter can do this as well, but it feels like it's meant more for specific moments of emotional intensity, as they don't tend to last as long. There also seems to be an attempt to stylize certain shots to give it the feel of what one might find in the manga. At least that's the vibe I get. I'm not as big a fan of these personally, except for the ones where the screen is split straight down the middle. You're gonna have your own preference, but there are always ways to make a scene or shot have just as much impact without essentially ripping the pages or panels out and pasting them on the screen. A mangaka has more limited space as well as color palette, so they need to do their best to convey the emotions, stakes, and reaction they want you to feel in only a handful of drawings. For better or worse, anime isn't constrained by that. With that in mind, Beastars has several scenes that, after conversing with my friend who read the manga first, with me being anime only, were handled better and worse in this new medium. Again, this is going to be personal preference and is by no means an exhaustive list, as I have not read most of the manga. But the one handled worse, since it comes chronologically first, is, as my friend described it, the scene where Legoshi goes Super Saiyan. Basically, to showcase Legoshi's instincts taking over, there's a sequence where his entire body seems to be overflowing with some energy, or maybe it's meant to show his nervous system kicking in and responding to Haru's presence without him in control. It's no doubt an ambitious bit for something that just seemingly switches on in the manga, and I do think either way it is effective, though with my initial experience being the anime, there was a bit of confusion about what was actually happening. As someone unfamiliar with the rules of this universe and the story, I wasn't sure if this was simply stylization meant to highlight Legoshi being overtaken by his instincts, or maybe some kind of infection, or some other third thing. Ultimately, minor issues, but for me at least, a part where I think trying to make it more dramatic nerfed the feeling the manga was going for just a bit. The choreography of the scene though, as well as the overall sense of atmosphere, do largely make up for my nitpicks with Legoshi going Super Saiyan. On the other hand, the scene that my friend thought was handled better, and after looking it up, I agree, was the part where the carnivores stumble upon the black market. In the manga, all we see is Aoba and Bill look off to the right of the page as Legoshi is being drawn in by the homeless animal offering his fingers, and then Aoba proclaiming they found what they were looking for. The juxtaposition and staging are a bit jarring all things considered, at least when compared to how the anime handles it. Here, we see there was a truck blocking the otherwise fairly obvious entrance to the black market. That little bit of context in tandem with the music and light coming through makes the reveal still jarring, but in a much more organic way. That then also serves to reinforce the stupor Legoshi finds himself in. And that's to say nothing of the incredibly haunting red scent trails emanating from the hands of the homeless animal that we see just prior to this. Overall, it's a simple scene that uses the advantages of the medium to surpass the manga, in my opinion. But again, I can't say that for certain for the series in its entirety, having not read the source material outside of the previously mentioned scenes. It's not fair to say that, and I'm sure if I do go and read the manga now, my expectations are already going to be a bit tainted with the anime being my first experience. Still, Beastars is undoubtedly a gorgeous production with the people behind it using CG to its fullest, and in doing so, making the scenes that aren't 3D, Haru's dream or Louis' backstory for example, stand out all the more for all the right reasons. And appropriately bookending these episodes are a CGED, the current and most prevalent use of 3D animation, and a stop-motion OP, or in other words, the original place you'd find 3D animation being used. Pretty f***ing cool. But those are just my thoughts, and as always, I'd love to hear what you have to say. Did you enjoy Beastars if you watched it, or are you waiting for the March worldwide release? Do you prefer the manga over the anime, or agree that they both have their merits? Those and any other thoughts you may have are welcome down below. Thank you so much for watching though, and as always, an especially big thanks goes out to my awesome patrons, OverjoyedSoup, MVPino, James Morton, Marbled Ranger, Spudge, Beorn, Pokkle, Yuki Aly, and everyone else whose support helps make videos like these possible. Links to that Patreon if you'd like to join them, my shirts, and everything else are either down below or on the screen right now. Leave a like and be sure to click that bell icon to keep up to date, or you could just follow me on Twitter for updates. Stay awesome, and I'll see you next time.